Welcome to the 5th lesson of mastering positional techniques. Thanks for all your support. I see all these likes. I know you are learning chess. And in today's video, we have an exciting topic, the rook pawns, which usually is very underrated. And you might be wondering why top players push, let's say, a5, h5, and try to create weaknesses, and today we'll try to dive deeper into it. And let's start by looking at this first position. We're looking from the black side, and now I want you to find what your ideas be here. Like, you know, some players would simply play knight bd7, continue their development, but usually, you know, when there is like this b3 c4, kind of this, you know, little things, little pawns, pawn chains, usually want to just go and destroy it. And in the following position, black play a very interesting a5. It's not the best move, but, you know, we're talking about rook pawns in this video, so, you know, we'll try to see more examples of how it can be implemented. So white go for castle, and now, of course, black continue with the pawn push. White try to go d3, and now, okay, we don't push a3 immediately, we play c6. So white could go knight a3, knight c2 potentially, but they decided not to. They play knight bd2, and now we play knight a6, kinda advancing and developing our knight. Pawn goes to d4, and now we push and create, as we call, the potential pass pawn, which will be our first concept for today's video. So usually, and we'll see more examples in the endgame positions as well, because look, it's only the opening. The game has only started, and it's not clear whether this pawn will become a potential, you know, queen later in the game. But at least we kind of create this precedent of this pawn potentially going there in the future. And also, like, knight goes to a6, it has a potential to go to b4 and, you know, threaten this pawn in the future on a2. And then, you know, once we take it, you know, this pawn is open to be the next queen. Bishop c3, and now b5. And as it turns out, this bishop on c3 is not feeling really well. C takes b5, c takes b5, knight goes to b1, b4, bishop d2, bishop d7, knight f5, bishop goes to b5, quite active position. White are very passive. Bishop goes to g5, h6, takes, knight goes to d2, queen b6, attacking pawn on d4, and black got a very serious advantage and ended up winning this chess game. Now let's look at more of middle game to like endgame position style. So here black have two bishops. We have very beautiful pawn structure on the king side as white, and unfortunately for black, those two bishops, the position is closed, and as we know, in close positions bishops kind of lose their power, and this bishop on a6 is just terrible. In the following position, white played h5, and as we saw in the previous example, we are trying to push this pawn as far as possible, and we actually will see why this h6 pawn will become a huge power later in the endgame. Bishop goes to b7, h6, king goes to 8, and now bishop b2. The idea is, of course, to play queen c3, and then trying to, you know, just bring the queen to the enemy's, you know, whole kingdom and just take every single pawn. So black play bishop b4, of course they try to prevent this idea from happening. Bishop goes to d4, attacking pawn on b6, queen goes to c7, protecting pawn on b6, and now queen d1, queen a1. We still kind of live with this idea of bringing queen to somewhere h8, g7, and just win the game. Bishop d6, queen a1, bishop c6, and now bishop e5 is crucial. Because as we are trying to get to the endgame, and you will see I highlighted h6 pawn because it is a huge power, and now we're trying to trade dark squared bishops. Because if we manage to trade, I mean the trade is inevitable at this point, we will get an absolutely insane knight against this terrible bishop in a closed position, which would be a win. And as you might see, the evil bar is just like showing a great advantage for white pieces. Bishop takes, king goes to f8, king d2, and now as you might see, these pawns are just absolutely insane, and white are completely winning. Bishop e8, knight e2, knight jumps to f4, d4, king e7, king c3, bishop d7, knight f4. The point is here, guys, if king now goes, let's say, to d8 or, I don't know, bishop c6, there is knight g6 idea. And this pawn in h6 finally turns out to be a huge power, because if this pawn takes h7, this is what you gotta watch out for in the endgames if, let's say, you are playing with black pieces, because it still might be, you know, your opponent might not be as strong and he might not be able to find these ideas, but, you know, you always gotta be careful and pose as many problems to the opposing side as possible. King f7, king b2, bishop a8, they hustled for a while before, and now white finally break through, king c6, king c4, and the position is completely lost. Now knight e6, bishop f7, you still gotta be very careful. It's still probably winning, king d5, king d6, knight f4, but why do that when we have king c5 and then simply take on e6, king b3, king d4, king c2, knight f4, and now e6, knight d5, and white ended up winning this chess game because knight f6, e7 is coming, the game was over. Now let's look at the rook endgame, which is usually considered to be kind of drawish. Here it all comes down to the king placement, and in the following case, you know, the black king is cut off from everything, and black potentially might cut off everything as well, rook b8, rook b1, but here white play h4 and try to create kind of this pass pawn by playing h5, and if g takes h5 is played, then, you know, there is f pawn. So black decided not to take, they go rook b8, h6, and now we reach this position where rook will go to g7, there's huge weakness on h7 at all times, and also the ideas of backrank checkmate. So a4, rook g7, rook a7, and the point is if rook moves and tries to attack a2 pawn, rook a8, rook b8 will be a checkmate, and white got a solid edge and won the game. And another great example of creating so-called passed pawn is this endgame, bishop endgame, h4, h5, h6. So as you might actually see, we saw this in all examples. This pawn is just hustling, whether it's on a file, on h file, it reaches h6, or let's say a3 as we saw, or let's say it would reach a6 as well, doesn't matter. And now there are constant ideas of bishop g6 and h7, so king can't even get to the pawns. I mean, it usually has to protect this pawn in order to avoid this bishop g6 idea. King f3, and now king just marches towards this b4 pawn, and it's all over. Bishop d3, bishop c8, king d2, bishop g4, king c2, bishop f3, king b3, bishop e4, trying to do kind of bishop trade. Bishop goes to a6, king s7, king b4, king u6, bishop c8, and the deadly threat of f5 just ends the game. If king c7, bishop e6, bishop g8, bishop h7, takes the pawn h7 and eventually win the game, it's a collapse, and white ended up winning this chess game. Now I hope you could understand like this potential pass pawn concept. Now we'll get to the next concept of this video. Let's go. The second concept of this lesson is so-called file opening by using the rook pawn. And what file would you open in the following position? We are looking at an example from the World Chess Championship match played between Anatoly Karpov and Garry Kasparov. They had like some crazy matches, you can Google it. They were just insane, they were played for years. And what's your plan would be in the following game? Like here, it's generally white are trying to put some pressure on this d5, c5 pawns, but you know, black gotta create sufficient counterplay in order not to lose it just like a one way. And this is where this file opening came in the following game for Garry Kasparov. He plays bishop b7. You might ask, what's the idea? As I highlighted, bishop e3 and just press this central pawns for black. So here the plan is quite simple. Garry is trying to open a file by playing a5, queen c1, and now a4. And his idea is, of course, to create counterplay by opening this open file. And in the following game, we don't play a3 like we saw in some previous positions, because here it would be actually a very bad choice, because we would allow white just to, you know, come our way. In the previous examples, there were not a lot of counterplay that, you know, white could create in order, or black, like we saw. Here, Black need to create counterplay, and they play 8 takes b3, 8 takes b3, and now bishop goes to f6, and you know, we're basically not threatening the d4 pawn, but we're just trying to also activate our bishop on this long diagonal potentially. White responded with knight e1, h6, bishop f3, queen s7, queen d2, rook a3, and black managed to create sufficient counterplay. Now let's look at another example played by another world chess champion, Alexander Alekhine. In the following game, it is an endgame. There are multiple ideas. Like, as you might see, black are kind of stuck in a way. So the pawn on c3 is, of course, cannot be taken because rook c2, and if knight bishop b4, then bishop d2, the piece is just lost. Here, you know, black gotta create counterplay in order to have some, you know, winning chances. They're not worse here, but they could play knight d3, you know, and just simply make a draw, because the king is just an absolute monster. All the pawns are kind of blocking crucial squares. Alekhine plays h5. Knight g2, rook goes to e8, trying to push e5. And in the following game, bishop e3, f5, and white play king d2, allowing black to play h4. So here, h4 is not available because knight would just... I mean, not even knight. But yeah, knight h4, f4, I'm just trying to calculate this is the best way possible. Yeah, if f4 is played, I was calculating h4, knight h4, f4, bishop can just go to d2. But the problem after king d2 is that after h4, if this knight takes, f4 just wins the piece. Because bishop will not be able to go to d2 and, you know, get this pawn, because this will have to take, and now knight will under no protection. King d3, h takes g3, and now the file is opened, and black enters the second rank. Bishop g3, knight f3, rook g2, this, rook g1, rook e2. Once again, there is like all these tactics. If f takes g3, there is rook g3, and the piece is lost anyways, because f4 is coming, rook e3 is coming, this, knight f4, just f4 probably, and just win the game. Rook e2 happened, bishop d6, and now, of course, black are completely winning, takes, rook h3, and the game is just over, because white have to sacrifice an exchange by playing rook e3, and Alekhine won the game. Now let's get to the third concept of this video. The third and the final concept of this video, I think, is very important. So we saw how annoying this rook pawn might be in certain cases. So what's the best way to deal against it? And in the following position, I would like to actually show you from the white side first. Like, so what's the black idea here? The black idea is, of course, to play h4 and just trying to push this pawn as far as possible, potentially open h-file for attack. So what's the best way to prevent it from happening? And of course, the best way to prevent it from happening is just to play h4. And we prevent h4 from happening, and at least there are no such threats anymore. But in the game, unfortunately for white pieces, they played queen d1, and black very, you know, not surprisingly, played h4 and trying to open h-file, king g8, rook d1, knight d4, knight d3, rook h6, queen e2, takes, queen g5, and black got a very strong attack and ended up winning the game. Now I want to show you quick different examples, let's say in the following position. You already saw kind of the final position. Here, black played h5. Their bishop is very active on d4, pawn is trying to go to h4, create some weaknesses inside white's kingdom. But of course, how to deal with it? Of course, to set up this so-called wave breaker by playing h4, and now this pawn is no longer moving to h4. Yeah, there are potential ideas of g5, but it's like very hard, and it's not the type of position where g5 would be a possible option. And now the final example. The final example is very interesting one, and here again you can't really make a serious mistake with black pieces. But white want at some point maybe to play g4, maybe to play h4, not h4, but generally like g4. So what would be the best way to counter that? And of course, the best way, as we saw in the previous example, is to play h5. And position according to computer is equal. Black made a slight mistake by playing f6, and white played g4, and even though this position is still drawish if both sides, I mean, in this case black, as they're down a pawn, play very precisely, it still would be a draw, but black actually ended up losing this chess game. And you know, this is where kind of could have gotten out better if they played h5, and now g4, you know, g5 ideas, h4, g5 just breaking through, g6, h5 is now not pushable, because g6 you leave f6 pawn protected, h5 you just, you know, at some point g5, it's just super bad. So you can see how the small mistakes matter. Those are two grandmasters, so you might actually see how, you know, one slight mistake can cause you a loss in the game. So that's it for today. Hope you enjoyed. Let me know if you have any questions regarding any of this, you know, maneuvers. I'll see you in the lesson number 6. Stay tuned. Bye bye.